Two men. One locked room. Years of hate pressed so tight against each other that no one, not even them, could tell where the anger ended and the longing began. This is not a love story that started gently. This is the kind that explodes. Philip had one rule at Celestia Private University in Lagos: stay out of John Adeyemi's way. It should have been easy. The campus was big enough, green lawns stretching between old brick buildings, rooftop libraries, a sports complex that smelled of sweat and ambition. There was space for everyone. But somehow John was always there. In the cafeteria line. In the corridor outside the business faculty. At the gym at 6 in the morning when Philip thought no one sane would be awake. John was 25. 210 pounds of sculpted, deliberate muscle. Jaw like carved mahogany. Eyes the color of dark amber, always slightly narrowed, always reading a room like he was deciding whether to own it or burn it down. He was the kind of man people moved aside for. Not because he asked. Because something in the air around him said, "Do not test this." Philip was 24. Quieter in how he carried himself, but no less built. Broad shoulders, a chest that strained cotton, hands that had grown up farming in Ibadan before a scholarship brought him to this world of marble floors and designer book bags. He did not belong here. John made sure he knew it. John, leaning against the corridor wall, arms folded, watching Philip walk past, said, "Every day," like a ghost that doesn't know it's dead. The laughter from John's group cut like a blade. Philip kept walking. He always kept walking. But that night, he stood at his dorm window and stared at the city lights glittering past the campus gate, and he made himself a promise. Tomorrow he would not flinch. It was a Thursday. The kind of Lagos afternoon where the heat pressed down on everything like a firm, warm hand. The campus library had only one air-conditioned private study room left, room 7. Philip booked it first. He spread his notes across the table, plugged in his earphones and exhaled. 1 hour of peace. That was all he needed. The door opened 9 minutes later. John filled the doorframe. White fitted shirt. No bag. Just his phone and a look that said he had not expected anyone to be here, and did not like being surprised. They stared at each other. Philip said, "I booked it." John said, "So did I." Double booking. System glitch. Philip pulled out his phone. Showed the confirmation. John looked at it, then showed his own. Same time. Same room number. Different names. John stepped inside. And then, he did something Philip did not expect. He turned around. And locked the door. Philip was on his feet in an instant. "What are you doing?" Philip said. John, his back still to the door, said, "I need to talk to you. Without an audience." "Unlock that door, John." John finally turned. And his face was different. Something raw in it. He said, "Please." Philip had never heard John say that word before. Not once in 2 years. He sat back down, slowly. His heart hammering against his ribs like it was trying to escape. John did not sit. He stood near the window, one hand pressed flat against the glass, looking out at the campus like he was searching for courage in the view. "You remember our first week," John said. "First year. Orientation." Philip said, "You called me the village import in front of the whole class." "I know." John's jaw was tight. Silence stretched between them like a held breath. Then John said, "I was scared of you." Philip almost laughed. "Almost. Scared?" Philip said. "Of me?" John turned from the window. His eyes were direct. Unflinching. "You walked into that room like you had every right to be there. No designer shoes. No connections. No apology. Just you. And I." He stopped. Looked at the floor. "I noticed you," John said. "Before I could stop myself. I noticed everything about you. And that terrified me." The air in room 7 changed. It became heavier. Warmer. Like it was holding something precious and did not want to let it go. Philip stared at John, really stared, and for the first time he saw it. The tension that lived behind the cruelty. The way John's hands would curl into fists whenever their eyes met across a room. He had always read it as contempt. He had read it completely wrong. Philip stood up. Not because he was leaving. He was not sure why he stood up. Maybe because sitting felt too still for what was happening inside him. "You could have said nothing," Philip said. "You could have kept doing what you were doing. Why now? Why today?" John reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He set it on the table between them like it weighed 10 kilograms. Philip unfolded it. It was a printout. A screenshot of an anonymous university forum post from 3 months ago. Someone had written about watching two men train together in the gym and feeling something they did not have words for. The writing was careful, precise, quietly beautiful. It was Philip's writing. His anonymous blog post. "How did you know it was me?" Philip's voice was barely there. John said, "You used the phrase quiet like harvest. You said it once in a group presentation 2 years ago. I never forgot it." Philip felt heat climb his neck. He had written that post about a man at the gym, tall, broad, intense, whose presence he could not stop noticing no matter how much he wanted to. He had never said who it was. But John had known. John had always known. Because the man in that post was John himself. Neither of them spoke for a long time. The city outside hummed. A generator somewhere kicked on. A distant car horn faded into the thick Lagos evening. Inside room 7 the only sound was breathing, 2 sets of it, unsteady and close. John moved first. Not fast. Like a man walking across thin ice, testing every step. He stopped when he was 2 feet from Philip and searched his face the way people search maps when they are lost. "I'm sorry," John said. "For all of it. Every word. Every stupid, cowardly word." Philip looked at this man, his bully, his obsession, his most confusing chapter, and felt 2 years of anger move through him like a slow tide going out. What was left underneath was something softer. Something that had been growing in the dark the whole time. Philip closed the gap. The kiss was not gentle. It was not rough either. It was the kind of kiss that comes after years of something building, honest, almost desperate, one hand gripping John's collar and the other flat against his chest, feeling a heartbeat racing just as hard as his own. John made a sound, something between a groan and a sigh, and his arms came up and pulled Philip in so tight the table nearly scraped the floor. When they finally broke apart, foreheads pressed together, both of them breathing like they had just run a long race, Philip laughed. A short, disbelieving sound. "I hate you," Philip said. John smiled, slow and real, and said, "I know. I hate you too." They had talked until 2 in the morning. Sitting on opposite ends of that study room table, then side by side, then shoulders pressed together as Lagos settled into the quieter sounds of the small hours. John talked about growing up in Abuja with a father who used silence as a weapon and masculinity as a measuring tape. About how every soft feeling he ever had came out sideways, as anger, as control, as cruelty dressed up as confidence. Philip talked about the farm. About his mother who knew, the morning he left for Lagos, and still held his face in both hands and said, "Go and be who you are, fully." "She said that?" John asked. "She said that." John was quiet for a moment. Then, "She sounds remarkable." "She is," Philip said. "You should meet her someday." The word surprised them both. Philip felt his own heartbeat stumble over them. Someday, like a promise he had not planned to make. John looked at him. Steady. Unguarded. Without the armor for the first time in 2 years. He was extraordinarily beautiful without it. "Are we doing this?" John asked. Philip said, "We're already doing it. The question is what we do next." John nodded. Slowly. Like a man agreeing to a leap he could not fully see the bottom of, but jumping anyway. 3 weeks later the campus noticed. Not because John and Philip announced anything. They were not the announcing type. But Lagos people are sharp. They notice the way 2 men walk in sync. The way a conversation shifts when someone special enters the room. The way silence between 2 people can be warm instead of empty. John's old group drifted. Some were confused. 1 or 2 were quietly supportive. One, his roommate Tund, clapped him on the shoulder one afternoon and said nothing at all, which was its own kind of acceptance. It was not easy. There were days John went cold, old habits, old fears pressing in. Days Philip had to remind himself that broken people do not heal in straight lines. But every morning they were at the gym by 6. 2 big, ripped, determined men side by side. No mockery, no audience, no performance. Just work. And after, coffee from the campus canteen, bitter and too hot, and conversation that never seemed to run out. One Friday evening, walking back from the library, the same corridor where John had once cut him down in front of everyone, Philip felt a hand find his. Big, warm, certain. He looked over. John was staring straight ahead. Jaw set. Chin up. Afraid and doing it anyway. Philip tightened his fingers around John's. He did not say a word. He did not have to. Some doors lock you in. Some doors, if you are brave enough to stop running, lock you in with everything you were always supposed to have. John had locked a door that Thursday afternoon. He had no idea he was also finally opening one. If this story made you feel something, seen, understood, hopeful, or simply curious, share it with one person who needs it. And if you are a John, carrying something heavy and pointing it at someone who does not deserve it, it is not too late to unlock the door. If you enjoyed this story, like, comment, and subscribe.